Good morning, folks. My name is Marc French, and welcome to Security Weekly Unlocked. Today, we're going to talk about start to finish, navigating your security career from analyst to CISO and beyond. And I will tell you, it will be a journey. So get ready. We're going to have a pretty lively conversation about how to get in, how to get up, and how to get out. So a little bit about me first. So a lot of folks may know me. I've been on Security Weekly before. In the Boston area, I usually kick around. Marc French, I'm the CISO and Managing Director at Product Security Group. Been a CISO here in the Boston area for a while. Came up through the engineering organization, moved over to ops, and then into product management. And currently, in addition to my role as a CISO, I chair the Mass Technology Leadership Council CISO group, and I'm the vice president up here at InfraGard Boston. One of the reasons Paul and Matt reached out to me was to really talk about growing security leadership. It's something that I've done. I had a great mentor when I was at Dun & Bradstreet a very long time ago, and I've taken to heart what he said to me to try to make sure that I give back to the community. Because the reality of it is that someday I'd like to retire. As you can see from my COVID beard, it's getting a little closer, but ideally at some point I want to train the next generation of folks that ultimately I can buy that dive shop in the Caribbean somewhere and call it a career in InfoSec. So let's kind of get started with this. But where does it usually start? What are we going to talk about today? I kind of like the watch analogy of representation of your day. So really, we're going to, at 9:05, your day is starting, your career is going to start in information security. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. I know likely folks may have already landed their first job. There are going to be folks here that are going to be looking to get their first job. So let's just talk a little bit about that. We're going to spend the bulk of our time really in the midday, lunch, noon section, which is really you've got a job in information security and you're really looking to move forward and you're not quite sure where you want to go, how to get there. So we're going to spend a lot of time really at around lunchtime. And then really in the 4:30 hour of your day, it's really going to be how to dismount from information security, whether you do it purposefully or someone dismounts you. We're going to really talk about what's next for you in your career, whether it's off running the dive shop or staying in InfoSec. We'll spend a little bit of time on kind of what's next once you've got to where you want to get to. So I think it's helpful probably to start with what are the roles today. When I started in information security a very long time ago, there was a role, information security. And at the time, I'll tell you, is really, for those folks that understand, RACF on the mainframe doing access control lists. That's really my first foray in information security. Roll forward 20 years or so, and we actually have roles in information security. And a lot of folks, and I talked to a lot of folks at the college level and at the high school level, and they're like, I want to be an information security person. And I said, that's great. Happy to have you in the field. What do you want to do? And they're like, well, what do you mean, what do you want to do? Or the answer is pen testing, usually one of the two of those. So it's good to level set folks on what are the roles, kind of the current landscape of roles inside information security, because a lot of folks may not know that there are more than one role, or they all think it's pen testing. So I really want to quickly go through these. Really 4 big tranches of roles today. The first, information security, is what I would consider the traditional information security role. So when you think of information security 2005, 2010, this is what you're thinking of. And today that's kind of morphed into kind of a cloud security bend, because a lot of folks are moving into the cloud, AWS, Azure, GCP. It's the vulnerability management, running the Tenable Nessus scanner over the top. It's the corporate information security, endpoint protection, Active Directory, ACL management piece that a lot of folks have grown up with. What I would tell you is that that role at the time was the right role for the discipline, but it's now become too much for someone to do. So we fractured the information security and created all these other roles. So the next natural evolution was risk, right? All of a sudden PCI came on board, Sarbanes-Oxley came up, ISO certifications became the norm. All of a sudden, we find ourselves in a situation where there's a lot of compliance work to do. So that's a bit of a specialty. It's a little less technical, a little bit more focused on regulatory. So we take those information security roles and we become these risk people. And they're talking about risk, they're talking about getting certifications, they're probably running your security awareness teams, all of the, less technical aspects of the information security program. Then what we see is another fracture in application security, meaning that the information security people, they're technologists, they're working with the ops folks. All of a sudden, these engineers come along. We're going to do SaaS. We need to build all of this stuff. That really takes a focus on someone who's come from the engineering discipline. So all of a sudden, we fracture yet again from information security to AppSec for those technical folks that are going to be more focused on the engineering discipline. So all of a sudden, we've created this third pillar of the information security practice in AppSec, whose sole job it is to enable the engineering and product management organizations to build security into their products. Then what we see happen is information security still doing vulnerability management. SOCs come in, and all of a sudden the discipline of responding to incidents has become so specialized that we basically pull another pillar out and fracture the information security group again into security operations. The sole focus it is to respond to incidents, do that red team management, malware reversing, and that's become a discipline onto its own. And I would even tell you that that's going to fracture in the future as that becomes more specialized. As you think about the intelligence functions, red teamers being a separate discipline. So all of a sudden you've got all of these roles that are out there with the pinnacle of your security leadership being your CISO and business security officers. And then add to that on the bottom what I'll call the friends and family plan, which is there are other roles within security that are starting to come about and converge into the information security practice. You see this happen a decade ago when we talk about physical security convergence with information security. So all of a sudden now you've got these physical roles interacting with the cyber roles. Near and dear to us with COVID-19, all of a sudden business continuity and disaster recovery has been at the front of news today, and all of a sudden you've got this discipline now feeling like it's more security related. And the reality is the last thing that we're seeing is as more and more complexity is driven into the information security practice, you've got the program managers. So all of a sudden you've got dedicated program managers in the environment trying to run large programs, whether they're compliance related or security related in the organization. So I leave this slide up there because it's good to set the level of exactly what we're going to talk about. So now that you've got an idea of the roles, let's figure out how to get there. So really what we're going to do next is talk a little bit about landing the job. So for those folks that have already had a job, bear with me for a second. We're just going to spend a little bit of time on this. 4 pillars that you should be focused in on. I use the gear because it does spin around a little bit. So first, where to look. What I would tell you is use your friends. They are going to be the best source of intelligence about jobs that are out there. They're going to know the job, they're going to know the company, they're going to hear about it long before it ever hits Indeed or Dice or Monster. Get a network of friends, use that network of friends. Secondly, look for internal opportunities. And I say this for a lot of folks that want to go into the AppSec discipline. If you're an engineer and they're running a champions program, here's your opportunity to get the training, skill yourself up, transfer into that application security team. The same I would say for systems administrators who have been maybe, a straight up Linux admin, they learn a little bit of security, they're now managing the directory. That's a good segue into the security team. So look for those internal transfer opportunities. I will give you a cautionary tale though. The recruiters are there and they can be helpful, but they do not have your best interest to heart. They're going to be there to fill a role and make their dollars. So, temper what the recruiter says to you when you're trying to get that job, because they are not necessarily looking out for you. They're looking out for themselves. I hate to say that, it seems extreme, but in my experiences, that's been true. Things to watch out. So you're out there looking, someone has a role. Now what? What I would tell you is that things to watch out for as you look for these roles. The scope of the role is important. So make sure you understand exactly what you're going to be responsible for. I will tell you that a lot of job descriptions are written to what I would call the purple squirrel, meaning that it wants you to do all of these things. There's 100 things on the list. No one has all of those skills. So in the interview process or as you're researching the job, make sure you get a sense of exactly what they're looking for, what's important and what's not as part of this job. Because while they put 100 things in there, there's probably 2 or 3 of them that are going to be the most important. Let's make sure you suss that out and understand that, and make sure you have some skills match, because you could match on 70 of them, but if the other 30 are the most important and you don't have those, that's probably going to end poorly for you. The cautionary tale on this one is, for me personally, and I believe this, and I mentor a lot of folks and tell them, believe in the mission of the company. Don't take the job to take the job unless you absolutely have to. Believe in the role that you're going to. Your day will be much better if you believe in the role as opposed to some place that's just turning a paycheck. I'm going to tell you that from experience. I've done that a couple of times to take a job for the paycheck, and I've left in a short period of time unsatisfied. So as you're looking for roles out there, make sure that you're focused in on the mission of the company and you believe in it. Because if you don't, you're not going to last very long, and you're not going to put your heart into it. So you need to consider that. Last one. So you figured out where to look. You kind of understand the role. Do the interview. So as you're starting in on the interview, what I would tell you is, it's not just a technical interview. Do your research on the business. Understand the products that they make. Ask intelligent business questions. Security used to just be a technical acumen, but today what I would tell you is there's a business lens to it. And as you progress up, and we'll cover this a little later in mid-career, you're a business person first, a technologist second, if you're trying to aspire to something like a CISO. So do your homework and make sure that you know a little bit about the company. I mean, this is just good interview practice. But I would also tell you, do a little bit of OSINT. You should be able to understand and figure out who some of the security folks are in the organization, also some of the technologies they use, because asking intelligent questions around that will help you discern whether or not it's the role that you want or not. Secondly, be collaborative. Security now is not a silo. You're going to be working across the business. So make sure that you highlight areas where you've collaborated with other groups in the organization, because it's going to be important for you to demonstrate that, because there's not an expectation now that you're going to be the security person in the back room and just doing the work. You got to be able to talk to other folks. You've got to be able to have interface with other organizations. So highlight that as part of that. It's going to be important for you. This is probably the most important cautionary tale here. This role is based on integrity. Do not lie. The organization and the universe of security professionals is small. It still is, even though it's growing exponentially as far as people. It will come back and haunt you. If you don't know, tell them you don't know. If you lie, get the job, and they find out, it will follow you in your career. I'll give you an example. Here in the Boston area, there's roughly 50 or 60 CISOs. Do not think for a moment that they don't all talk to each other, because they do. So you just recognize that you go into this interview, be yourself, be collaborative, don't lie, answer. If you don't know, don't know. It will be refreshing. The people will not hold that against you if you tell them you don't know. So that's it. You look for a job, you found a job, you got the job. Number one thing to do, you got to get through probation, right? If you don't make 90 days, it really doesn't matter. So, what I would tell you is, some of the most important things you can do before you even start is come in with a plan. You should have a 30, 60, 90-day plan about what you hope to accomplish when you land. It shows that you've given it some thought and you're ready to hit the ground running. Nothing's better than presenting your new boss that plan the day you start. It's important for them to understand that you are committed to this job and you're engaged. Secondly, the other bit of advice I would give you is, meet as many people as you can. Do not sit at your desk and hope that people come to you. You need to get up and go out and meet folks. That will help you in the long run, and we'll cover this in mid-career as one of the most important things you need to do. You need to get out there and meet folks, because those are the people that are going to help you be successful, not only in this job, but all the other jobs that you're going to have. So get those 2 things done. Lastly, and this is more so for folks that have already been in the career, be humble. I know you've been in security a while, you're taking a new gig. Do not feel that you know everything about that and you always have the answers. Your peers will react poorly to that. Listen more than talk, and be humble, because yes, you have experience, but you don't have this experience at that organization. So, if I could give you one tale here, is just listen more than talk the first 90 days, and just recognize that everything's not a hammer and a nail. Every organization is different and their challenges are going to be different. So we've talked about how to start. what the jobs are, how to get in. So you've got a job, you're working. And most security professionals last 2, 3, 5 years tops, and then they're looking for another gig. So here you are. You've been a couple of years in the seat at your position, and you're like, what do I do next? How do I advance? Where do I go? So let's talk about prepping for the future. So 8 skills that you need to try to recognize and foster as you move your career forward. Technical skills. What I would tell you is that, and I mentioned this earlier, yes, you'll still need to hone your technical skills, especially if you're going to stay in the technical track. But you need to get business skills, those collaboration skills, understanding of the other disciplines within an organization, be it logistics, marketing, finance, HR. You need to begin to understand and get trained in those disciplines, because it's only going to help you be more successful in the organization. If you know a lot about marketing and they have a security issue or a new product and third-party vendor management that's coming in, and you know about what the pain points are in marketing, you're going to be that much more helpful to them in the decision process of whether or not this is the right vendor or not. So recognize that even if you're going to continue in the technical track and be that uber specialist in cryptography, you still need to get some business acumen in order for you to be successful in a collaborative work environment today. Second one, I hate to say this, it seems very, old school government-y, but there are organizations where sometimes you just need to be for a while. So you're not going to be the CISO with 2 years of experience. I'm going to tell you that straight up. It's not likely going to happen. So, just recognize that you will have to put some time in, and it will vary depending on the nature of the organization, small or big, how long that is. But just recognize that it's all not going to happen in a day. I mean, I've had folks work for me who have wanted a promotion after six months of work, and then another 6 months. And I'm like, you just do not have enough experience. So just recognize that you're going to have to put some time in grade in order for you to fulfill your career aspirations. Education, pet peeve of mine. I am a firm believer that it is not a requirement to have a bachelor's degree to be a rock star information security professional. It has taken a lot of convincing in the HR realm to tell them that that's true. I honestly think some of the best people that I have hired in my information security departments have not been security professionals. So recognize that you don't necessarily need that cyber, sorry to the folks from the colleges and universities on this talk. You do not need that cyber education right out of the gate in order to be a good InfoSec person. It's all about, do you have the attitude to do it, and do you have the aptitude? I could care less, to be honest with you, what degree you have, if you have a degree. And I'm working with some high school students now that are going to make fantastic information security professionals, and they probably have no desire maybe to go beyond an associate's degree. So those folks are going to be great. They don't need to get a bachelor's degree. So what I would tell you is, as far as advanced degrees, I would say to you, pursue one if you're going to get a skill, not if you think it's going to allow you to advance. So if you're deficient in finance and you want to learn about finance, go get that advanced finance degree, but don't get the degree to have the degree. I just think save your money. You could use it for other things that you could need. I think if you're not learning something, don't go get the degree. The money can be better spent buying that vacation home on the Cape or something like that. But talk about certifications, the love-hate relationship with certs. I would say as a entry level or junior person, a certification helps demonstrate to me that you have some skill and you're able to have the aptitude to do information security. But I'll be honest with you, as your career progresses, getting more certs doesn't really change my mind about whether or not you're going to advance or not. My expectation is that you're a solid person based on your experience, not whether you have a CISSP or not. The caveat there, I would say, is if you're going to learn something, take the cert, right? If you've never done privacy and you want to get a CIPP to learn all about privacy, awesome, do that. But don't get the cert for the sake of the cert. It's not going to help you. Dovetailing on the top, when we said technical skills, we mentioned it earlier, business skills. You're going to need to learn some of this stuff, even at the rudimentary level. There's some life things in here too, like learn some finance because it could be helpful in your investments and in your home accounting. You're going to need to learn some of these things. One of the things that I will tell you here that I recommend to all aspiring CISOs, if you've come up through the information security department, is take a job outside of security. What I would tell you is that your credibility will rise dramatically with your peers at the senior executive level if you've done something other than the security discipline. I call it the little C versus the big C. So you're a CISO, you're still going to have that C, but the reality of it is that they'll always look at you as someone who didn't carry a number, didn't drive business objectives. If you're thinking about that, think about moving laterally into another organization, even for short term. Doesn't mean you can't come back to security, which you likely will, but think about that as potential going forward. Cross-discipline networking. We're going to cover this a little later in a slide that I call the scurry of swirls, in that you need to start to get a Rolodex, I'll date myself, of folks that are not security professionals that you're going to need to lean in on when you have squirrely problems. So you might have a legal issue, you might have a logistics issue, you might have a financial issue, running your operation or running your team. You need to have folks that are not security people that you can call on. So we'll cover that a little bit later. That next one is networking and bench. Make sure that you learn about all your others. You saw the list of all those security professionals. Meet and be friends with somebody in every one of those, because you never know, A, when you're going to need them, and B, if you rise up to being a senior leader, you're going to need to fill those positions on your team. So there's nothing better than hiring known quantities. So if I have Sally and she's a great BCDR person, and I take a CISO role and I have a BCDR role, I'm going to call Sally first, and she's going to be my first number one candidate for that particular role. So make sure that you fill that out. And then lastly, I know we're on squirrel analogies today, is what I'll call external squirrel. So as you progress up, make friends with your peer groups. You will likely get into a tranche that will you'll rise with organizationally. So I have a group of folks that I've risen up through the CISO ranks with that we are friends with, and we communicate all the time. So if I have an issue and I need to ask an objective question from somebody or an opinion, I'll ask them. So it's always good to have someone at your same level that you can bounce ideas off of. So foster those relationships. They will be the most beneficial for you going forward. So these are some of the things that you're going to need to be thinking about as you progress your skills up. So let's bounce over to this. So things to consider. So I call this my prediction slide as I kind of crystal ball out where I think the roles are going as you think about what you're going to do in the future 5 to 10 years. I'll call mild predictions and controversial predictions. So the mild prediction number one is this kind of decentralization within InfoSec is going to continue. So a lot of roles that have been traditionally InfoSec, you've already seen it, like firewall management have gone into the networking team. This is going to accelerate as more and more security acumen gets driven into the teams. What that means for you is you're going to get more specialized. We'll cover that in a second. But it also means that likely the security teams will get smaller. The security functions and roles will get bigger, but the actual centralized team will likely get smaller. So one thing to consider if you're a security middle manager, there's a little bit of danger here if you're not willing to drive into the business and you think you're going to stay in the central security team. Your remit may get smaller and those roles may get harder and harder to achieve. Next thing is what I'll call the rise of the coordinator, meaning that more and more of these things are getting hyper complex. So the need for program management in the information security department is going to rise. So you're going to see more and more teams actually hire more and more program management resources in order to drive initiatives in the organization. I mentioned it earlier. I think you're going to get hyper specialization. We saw the fracture from core information security into the other disciplines. You're going to see that even further. I mentioned it with the SOC, where all of a sudden, the intelligence function is a specialization. Red team is specialization. Law enforcement liaison is going to be a specialization. You're going to see more and more of that as things roll forward. Lastly, mild prediction, more and more convergence. We started to see this with physical security about a decade ago with mixed results. I would postulate that you're going to see the same thing with privacy, that more and more teams, the legal aspect will stay in legal, but the operational aspects of privacy are probably going to fall within the security team. You're going to see with BCDR get folded back in again. It was pulled out. It's probably likely folded back in. So you're going to see more and more folks roll into this. So note for the GRC team, brush up on your privacy a little bit. So let's talk about controversial. So here are Marc's controversial picks for my fantasy football lineup for the weekend. Code. I will tell you right now that I do not hire an information security professional, regardless of the discipline, if they do not have a basic amount of coding expertise. They do not have to be rock star Python programmers, but if nothing else, I need them to be able to do some automation in the deal that they have, because I don't have unlimited bodies to do stuff. You need to be able to automate some of your work tasks. Automate first, DevOps principle. So if you're not learning to code, you better figure out how to learn how to code, because that is going to be a standard requirement for most security professions, I think, going forward. We have a little bit of a junior dilemma. I spent all that time talking about how to break in. The challenge that we have is those things are going to be more distributed, and as we become hyper specialization, they're going to want more exports. And then how does a junior break into the role? I don't have a good answer. I call it the junior dilemma. I think it's going to happen. I just don't have an answer for this. It's something that we need to keep our eye on as leaders, on how we do this, so that we don't shoot ourselves in the foot and then end up not being able to have folks fill us when we want to retire. Here's probably one of the most controversial ones. That tranche on the left, where I say the information security role, I think if you're going to ask me 10 years from now, there are going to be very few people in that role. With the rise of DevOps, infrastructure as code, those roles are starting to shift into the AppSec role. Traditional running data centers and even endpoints. What's an endpoint now? When you have BYOD, all of that, I think, is going to take that traditional role and wane down. So if you're that information security person, in 10 years, there'll still be roles at larger organizations, more traditional, but in newer orgs, those roles are likely not going to exist like they do today. And they'll probably more like the AppSec role. So back to coding, infrastructure as code, DevOps, those are all becoming functions of the engineering team, not the operations team. Therefore, who does the engineering team interface with? AppSec people. So if you're an AppSec person, you should be learning some of that infrastructure, because you're going to be called upon to do this. But it also means that the level of interface is going to be much higher, because they're going to be pushing more and more on this kind of code process. So learn to code, recognize that you as an AppSec person are going to have to do more infrastructure work, and recognize if you're an information security person, you probably need to become an AppSec person. Pretty controversial. Throwing it out there for discussion. I'll make a pitch now. I'm going to be on Discord, so when we get to this slide, let me know, and we will answer the best I can. So let's go out the slide, but I've been using the squirrel analogy the whole time. What I wanted to highlight here is, going back to the earlier slide of building your network. You need, as a professional throughout your career, to make sure that you can have folks you can lean in on organizationally. So what I try to do with this slide is present everybody, these are the folks, as you progress your career, you need to make friends with, or have somebody that you can call if something happens. It's an extensive list, but I'm going to tell you straight up, if you're going to be a CISO, you better have somebody on the list for every one of these disciplines, be it finance, legal, marketing, facilities, sales, ops, human resources. You better have a checkbox next to every one of those names and a phone number you can call, because at some point in your career at that organization, you're going to need to make a call or have a question on this, and you better have somebody you can ring up. Purple squirrel analogy, again, on the side. There are not a lot of these folks that can do all of this. When you find them, maintain friendship with them. These folks are going to be extremely helpful for you going forward. So if you can find yourself a purple squirrel as a friend, make sure that you keep that friend going forward. It's important that these folks are probably at the vanguard of everything. So they're at the tip of the spear on a whole bunch of technology and interfaces. You probably want to make sure that you keep friends with them, because they will help you in your career and drive you forward. There's a lot here. I'm not going to go through every one of these. Take a look at these. We'll handle them in Discord if you want to chat about what these exactly mean, but make sure that you're starting to think about growing that network, not just in information security. I find so many information security professionals are so myopic in their view. They're starting to build their network, and it's only information security people, not recognizing that that is not the whole universe in which you operate in. And I say that is true not just for folks that are aspiring to be a CISO, but also the folks that are just doing the technical track. Because, for example, if you're driving up to that fellow engineer level and you need to do a patent application, you better understand who that intellectual property attorney lawyer is, so that you can ask questions to file that great security patent that you've been trying to do. So let's talk about, for a second, what I'll call the Pinnacle Career. I guess what I'll start with is, I mentor a lot of folks and they all come to me, and most of them say, I want to be a CISO. We'll talk about what the job is. What I tell them first off is in order for you to advance, there's really no need in modern world to actually have to become a CISO in order to have a fruitful career in information security. Everybody gets it in their mind. It's the peak job. I have to get there. That's where I'm going to make the money. What I would tell you is that organizationally, most companies now have technical tracks. So if you're a technologist and you want to stay a technologist, you still need to do that little bit of business skill, I'm telling you right now, but you can stay a technologist throughout your career and have a really good career going forward. Second part of the conversation goes, I usually ask them, what do you think a CISO does for their day? And I get this wild, we're doing a whole bunch of stuff. What I will tell you is that in all but the smallest organizations, you will not be a technologist anymore. That is not the job that they are hiring you for. I'm going to pause there for a second because that's controversial. We're all technologists. We've come up through technology. If you're looking to be a CISO, that's not the job for you. You are not going to be a technologist. It's just the company needs something more of you. They need a business person. So the amount of time that you're going to spend on technology, as you see in this chart, is a fraction of what you're going to do. And I'll be honest with you, if you're spending a large amount of time, and you are in the seat CISO today doing this, you are doing a disservice to your organization, because that is not why they hired you. It is absolutely not why they hired you. So you need to step back and delegate out, because you need to be focusing on the things that they actually hired you for. Second thing, paperwork. Yeah, I know. It is what it is. So you are a leader of folks in the organization, and you are a business driver. With that comes a lot of paperwork, whether it's signing regulatory PCI assertions, it's doing your employee reviews, it's talking to vendors, it's producing reports for the board. You are going to spend a fifth of your time doing paperwork. That's just what it is. So if you don't like doing paperwork, this is not the gig for you. That said, I've seen many folks drift too far into the paperwork, which means they're not focused on the other things that they need to be doing. So what I would tell you here is that if you're north of 30%, you need to delegate. Enable your teams to do some of this paperwork for you, because you're spending too much time at your desk writing stuff and not enough time doing the activity that I feel is the most important thing that you can do as a CISO, which is meetings. And everybody just sighed when I said meetings. But the reality of it is the most important thing that you can do for your organization is to get out in the organization, talk to people, describe the functions of your team, describe why it's important. It is the most important thing you could do. Now, I know it's tough now in the C19 era where we're on Zoom all the time. I'm on Zoom all day as well. You need to do this connection. That's your number one job, whether it's at the marketing your organization, you're communicating up to your senior leadership team or the board, you're communicating down to your staff or the frontline engineers in your organization or any one of the other ones. That's what you need to do. You'll be talking about your goals, talking about the strategy of the team and how it's going to go forward, and the impact that your business is going to have, that security is going to have on your business. Because let's face it, at this level, there's an expectation you're a business person first. And you're going to impact the business either at the top line revenue or at the bottom line on the expense. So get yourself familiar with having that conversation and focus in on this particular area. And what I would tell you is, if you're spending less than a quarter of your time doing meetings, you're probably not communicating enough in the organization. I can't stress this enough. I know I'm harping on it. This is the most important thing you can do if you strive to be a senior leader in the organization. It's all about getting out in front and delivering. You manage your mid-career goals, so you have all your stuff, you become the CISO, you've been working in the job, and then it starts to get late in the day, right? So here we are, it's starting to get to be 4:30 in the afternoon, and you start asking yourself, it's time to go. I'll share you a story here. I had this moment before I started this organization, this consulting company I'm running. I went through this time to go, and that's kind of what generated this slide. I'd been in the seat a few times, and I'm like, I'm done. I'm not sure I want to be a CISO again. I want to do something different. There will come a point in your career where that happens. So let's talk through that a little bit, because it's important. Deciding when it's time to go. There's always the involuntary one, right? It happens. I tell everybody, you need to get fired once in your life just to experience what it's like to get fired, because a lot of times, you're participating, especially as a security professional, you're participating on the other side and say, in that exit interview with somebody that's either getting laid off or getting fired, and, having not experienced it, back to my earlier comment about, hey, if you're a security person, you should go work in business because you get credibility. There's nothing more than having the empathy for the person on the other side. What I would tell you here is sometimes it just happens. You've done everything that you could do, and it still happens. And this is especially true at the senior leadership level. You as a CISO or a senior security person could have done everything you could have done. And unfortunately, the street or the market requires somebody to get fired, and that's the job you signed up for. So don't take it personally sometimes, because you could have done everything you possibly could have done, and they're still going to need to let somebody go. On the positive side, today, there's very little stigma on getting fired. I did talk about the people talk to each other, and the CISOs talk to each other, so they know everybody else. But the reality of it is the ones that I know tend to give people second chances, because it's usually the cultural fit wasn't there. It doesn't mean the cultural fit's not there in the other organization. And as a CISO, especially, there's just an expectation you get fired or get let go at some point in time. So there's very little stigma. So on the positive side, that if you are let go involuntarily, recognize you've probably done everything you could do, and recognize you're going to get another job. You're not going to be unemployed. The second one, I know there's other tracks today talking about this, burnout. This is very real. I've had this happen to me twice in my career. I have got to a point of time where I was suffering as a result. So, recognize that if you're in this position and you find yourself turning to alcohol and family, like I said, listen to the other talks on this. You need to get help. This job is not worth your family or your health or your friends. I'm going to be straight up with you. So reach out, listen to the other talks, look at mental health hackers, deal with this. It needs to be dealt with. Third, mission. And I mentioned a little earlier, you should believe in what your company does. If you don't, your heart's probably not in it. So you may have joined a company understanding the mission and love the mission, and it can change, right? Business changes, corporate culture changes. If the mission changes and you don't believe, it's probably time for you to go, because your heart's not going to be in it. So you probably should be thinking about moving on. Last one is growth. I'm a firm believer in, and you guys know this, if you're not learning in information security, you're dying. So if you're not growing in your role, you're coasting. And for those folks that have more than 10 years out, you should probably go get another job. I say that jokingly because I have friends that are 62 or 63, and I'm like, go get a job that you can retire at. I won't tell you where. I have a standard clause for that, but we'll leave that off the recording. But if you find yourself in a role where you're not growing, you should consider getting a different role. Everybody's generally too young to not be progressing forward. Now, so what's next? So you've made this decision, either voluntary or involuntary, to leave, and you need to figure out what you're going to do. I'll call it, 4 big areas. Position round number, which means you're going to go get another gig somewhere, right? Whether it's within that, or you're going to try to move up, you're going to try to get another gig. That's what most people do, to be honest with you. They're in their career, mid-career especially, they're going to go get another gig, maybe with a little bit more responsibility, and work their way up the ladder. what I would tell folks that are more mature in their career is get out there and consult or teach. You've got a tremendous amount of wealth of knowledge. Share that with folks. It's important to bring the next generation up. So consider consulting, consider teaching at a university. Even though I kind of poo-pooed universities earlier, it's important for them to get grounding in their folks. Think about doing that. Third, dive in. I've done 5 startups in my career, in addition to some more established companies. I started the corporation I'm in today as my 6th and last. I told my wife I had one more in me. Sometimes you got a great idea, you got a lot of experience, go for it. I'll be honest with you, for me personally, it's been exhilarating to be back at a startup, kind of doing exciting things that I hadn't done in a very long time. So what I would suggest is that, take a chance and just do it. Lastly, I talked about it earlier. Think about those business roles. You've done that job, you've learned those business skills. You might find that is actually your passion now. So do not be afraid to actually consider a business role that you could choose to do. It can be an amazing opportunity for you. You might learn to love the fact that you want to be an attorney, or you might want to be a human resources professional. So recognize with information security for the whole 65 years of your life. That's about it, folks. Hopefully everybody enjoyed it. I will be on Discord for folks as questions come up. This is my contact information. Easiest way is to get me at AppSecDude on Twitter. If you're interested in becoming a CISO, I run a quarterly mentorship program. Reach out to me at the email address above and we can have a chat. Thanks again for joining, and have a great rest of the conference.